Hi everyone. So we are on to stanza 5 of Visiting Hour, and in this video, just like the last few, we're going to take just a quick run through the stanza, pointing out the key bits of analysis, things like that. Obviously not going into full details about that analysis, but just giving you a sort of heads up for where the specific points of focus might be when you come to write about it. So here we have the stanza. And the first thing that you would notice is that Ward 7, full stop. So this is the turning point in the poem. Everything before this point in the poem has been about, the walk through the hospital, the walk towards the ward. This is the point at which he reaches this destination where this, presumably terrible event is going to happen. So we have Ward 7 full stop, and the pause that's created after the full stop is called a caesura. Now that pause is reflecting the sort of pause that the speaker is taking. So see, while we stop and sort of take a deep breath and then move on with the full stop, imagine the speaker doing that. He sort of comes round the corner, he sees Ward 7 with the number, just like the sign in the hospital is what we've got here. And then what does he do? Well, given what's happened before and given what he expects to come after, he stops, takes a deep breath, tries to compose himself, and then in he goes. And when he goes in, he sees her lying there in this white cave of forgetfulness. So the white cave is obviously a reference, is a description of lying in the hospital bed with the white curtain round the bed and the white sheets and stuff like that. That's the literal explanation. But metaphorically, it's making use of the features of a cave, this idea of being isolated and cut off from the world. And there's also the fact this sort of white cave tends to sort of nudge people towards thinking about the idea of being surrounded by the white light, and that obviously has got a pretty direct connotation to death being very close by, which is relevant here. After that, we get a bit about the withered hand trembles in its stalk, which is imagery, which is comparing the speaker to, like, a dying flower, perhaps, something with a stalk, and maybe the withered hand then becomes petals on the end. Worth asking maybe what kind of flower you think it is. But this and the next kind of few sentences are very much about the speaker looking at the patient and sort of being hit by the visual effectively. So at first he looks at her hand and he sees this withered hand, something with the kind of goodness drained away, trembling, which certainly is very slight movement, but also has implications of fear that maybe he's projecting onto her. The eyes move behind the eyelids too heavy to raise, shows you how ill she is, that she can't even open her eyes, although she still is in there because her eyes are moving. The glass fang is again, so like he looks at her hand and tries to look at her eyes, she can't open her eyes, so he looks back to her hand and then up her arm. And if the hand was withered, the arm is wasted of colour. And what he sees there is, in his mind, a glass fang, a fang obviously being something which is threatening that we associate with dangerous animals. So he looks at it, and it's kind of like that bit in stanza 2 where he's seeing death everywhere, even though he knows that isn't what's really there. He looks at this, and his first instinct is to look at it, and she's so sort of drained of colour that it looks as though this thing is draining the life out of her. But they realise that isn't what's happening. This is actually, something that's putting something into to try and keep her alive. But it's about those first impressions and what they tell you again, as like everything else, about the state of mind. And then it ends with this thing about the distance of pain. So it says distance shrinks so there's none left, which means obviously he's got right next, so there's no distance. Must mean they're touching. He's maybe holding her hand. So there is none left but the distance of pain that neither she nor I can cross. So there's this even though they're sitting next to her, even though he's maybe holding her hand, there's this barrier that's keeping them separated, and that's obviously creating this huge amount of pain for him, right? So for her, we can assume that the pain's probably physical, given her some sort of illness and that she appears to be dying, and for him the pain's emotional. But neither of them can overcome it. They're both sort of trapped by that that pain, that burden of pain that they're feeling at this time. And that's stanza 5, so one more to go for stanza 6, and then there'll be a complete collection giving you a very quick, admittedly, run through all of Visit Hour.